Hi, welcome back to the Beliefs Bazaar. My name's Alex, and I just wanted to talk real quick about a feature of the Earth that flat earthers have a really hard time accepting, or, generally people don't understand very well how the atmosphere is contained over our Earth without venting into space. As people like to say in the flat Earth community, that you can't have pressurized gas next to a vacuum, the pressure will equal out. Well, that is true on the surface of the Earth. And when we're talking about pressurized systems, the pressure of the atmosphere at sea level is only about 14 pounds per square inch. So that's not very high pressure if you've ever, been around pressurized gas tanks. Like if you're welding or, my personal thing, I do glass blowing, those are high pressure systems, upwards of 2000 psi. That's a big pressure differential. Now, the thing that you're not thinking about when you talk about the, contained gas or pressurized system next to a vacuum is the Earth's gravity. And I found some things you can just read. I'll pop this up for, here's for people on YouTube. If you want to pause this real quick, peruse it. This is for the TikTok viewers. And as it describes, the Earth's gravity pulls the air molecules closer to the surface. And the pressure that we have closer to the surface is because there's more air molecules above them, creating more pressure. It's like more weight. The deeper you go into the ocean, the heavier, the more pressure you're going to feel because there's more water above you. Well, that's the same thing that happens with the atmosphere. And as anyone that's ever taken a hike into a mountain, or, just high elevation place, the air is thinner. You have a harder time catching your breath, or maybe you have to walk slower or hike, at a slower rate because you're just not getting as much oxygen as you're used to at lower elevations. Well, that is a function of gravity and the amount of air above us to create that pressure differential. And it's not that we have just when the atmosphere ends and space begins, there's no definitive line between that. It's just the air becomes less and less and less dense until there is essentially no more air. And of course, we won't be able to breathe significantly below that level where we kind of define where space begins and the atmosphere ends. But that's essentially it. If you deny that gravity exists or that we're on a globe, none of that will make sense to you because you don't understand how gravity could possibly work in the way that we described that it does if there's no forces that define it or that there's nothing that induces gravity. And in this case, it's the mass of the Earth. And I invite everyone to look into more about gravity, how we know it exists, and while we can't actually define the specific thing that causes gravity, or rather it seems to be a byproduct of mass. Now, we can't say why it's a byproduct of mass, but we can observe the fact that it exists and operates on everything that we experience. And so we've been able to deduce what the functionality of gravity is based on our observations and everyday experiences, and of course, a bunch of experiments that scientists did over the years. But generally, we're not going to be able to say, oh, gravity is a function of mass because this, we just know that it is, right? And therefore, that is the same, physics, gravity that causes the atmosphere to stick to the Earth. And that's what it is. I hope that clears some things up for people. At this point, I find that tends to be a pretty frequent argument that flat earthers try to use to kind of make people think, oh, wait, that doesn't make any sense. But it only doesn't make any sense if you've never looked into it and don't understand gravity or pressure systems. And so there it is. Hope that helps people. Don't just take my word for it. I invite you to continue looking into it, whether that be, on Wikipedia, which has some great articles on the topic, or some other peer-reviewed studies, which will explain very well the features of our atmosphere, how gravity affects it, and, even going to space. I've heard a lot of people say oh, well, they're in these pressure suits and, whatever. The pressure in a pressure suit in space isn't that much pressure It's only an atmosphere pressure to sustain human life. It's not like these high pressure tanks that we use for like welding and stuff like that. It's not that big of a pressure differential. And that is why like spaceships and things don't need to be these like foot thick like walls, even though many of them are fairly thick. I believe some of the windows are upwards of 10 to 14 centimeters, which is pretty thick for a window. But it doesn't need to be these, massive constructions, because the pressure that they're containing, the pressure differential between inside and outside, isn't that significant comparatively, I guess, to other things that we are used to dealing with on the surface. Have a great day.